get started, let's quickly review the benefits of scheduling billable events. First, it reserves time slots on a caregiver's calendar while at the same time allocating units from a client's authorization in order to prevent service delivery over the authorized amount. The scheduled events then translate to either a note or to a billable time record when notes are not implemented. To understand the recommended best practices for implementing the schedule, please see the scheduling video titled An Overview of How to Implement Billable Events. Now, let's take a look at how billable events are scheduled. First, the default view for the calendar will be the month view. You can toggle this to week, work week, or day if you find it easier to schedule in a view other than month. Once your preferred view is set, click on a day to schedule the event. Your name will auto-populate as the caregiver based on your login. If you are scheduling for someone other than yourself, open the drop-down and change the name. Remember, you will only see employees and clients that are in the cost centers you are assigned to in the security setup. You can always verify those cost centers by going to Options and then reviewing your cost centers. You will then set the scheduled event as either billable or non-billable. If the event is specific to a client and a service, it will be billable. If the event has nothing to do with the client and or service and is specific to the employee, such as staff trainings and administrative time, it will be non-billable. This video will only go through the steps of scheduling billable events. You will have the choice to enter a schedule for an existing client, meaning the client is already entered into the system, or for a new client. New client is used when the client has not yet been entered with their intake and authorization information, and therefore the client name is not found in the existing client dropdown. The most common scenario for this is when this is the first time scheduling an appointment for the client. This gives you the means to quickly reserve the time slot on the staff's calendar without having to fully set up the client. Be aware that when going this route, the scheduled item may not be linked to a note or will not create a billing record until the client and authorization information have been entered. You are simply keying in a client name in order to fill the time slot and provide the client name to the caregiver. Notice that you have a Create Client button at the bottom of the screen. This button allows you to create the client record while in the new client mode. You may begin entering the required elements, all marked with an asterisk, to get a start on establishing the client in the system. When all of these fields have been entered, you may save the client record. This is the same as going to the client's desktop and choosing to add a new client. If the client to be scheduled has an existing client record and an entered authorization, then you will select the existing client option. Open the drop-down and select your client. Notice that in this mode you have an Open Client button. You can go directly to the client record to review, add, or edit any info necessary. You will then choose the Authorized Service. The services displayed will be the authorized services specific to the client that cover the date you are scheduling for. This is an important feature as it ensures that your anticipated service delivery will never be provided without coverage from the authorization. The end date of the authorization is displayed with every service so that you know how far in advance you can enter scheduled events. This is also a great reminder of when authorizations are about to expire. The date populates based on the date you clicked from the calendar. Enter in the start time and end time or the duration, whichever your service is set to capture. The units will auto-calculate based on the time entered, as well as taking into consideration the service configuration, whether it is a daily service, periodic, and so on. Amount will only be used when scheduling for non-billable events specific to the employee. You will have the option of attaching your scheduled events to a status. The status is just a way of color-coding events so that you can group alike events in a meaningful way. You can then search and view all events with that status. For example, if I link this event to the status of intake, I can then search my status of intake to view all appointments linked to intake. You may then choose to flag the time as indirect, which means that the event will not be face-to-face with the client. You can also choose to flag the time as out of community, which means that the event will be performed in the office. Additionally, you may choose to hold bill and/or hold pay the event, which would prevent the time from being billed or pulled into payroll. And lastly, you may choose to enter in a comment that further defines the details of the event. The comments are shown in tooltips on the calendar, and they are also printed on the schedule report. You now have the option to save this single event or to build a reoccurrence pattern. That is beneficial when the service is consistently provided over a period of time, or if you wish to schedule for the duration of the authorized period. To build the reoccurrence, simply enter the to date, select the days of the week, and set the frequency pattern. After clicking Save, the system will do an internal check to validate that the time being scheduled is in compliance with the authorization, the client record, and the staff record. If anything is out of compliance, such as exceeded units, expired client consents, expired employee certifications, or if there's overlapping time, then a list of the validations will be presented. You will need to read the warning messages carefully and determine how to handle. In this case, the units have been exceeded. When exceeding units, you may want to reference the Client Services report to understand how many units you have exceeded and determine how many you have left to schedule. That report is found under the Reports dashlet in the dashboard. You may also learn more about the unit handling by watching the overview video mentioned earlier. When the warning messages are thrown, you will need to determine if you will override the message or if you will cancel it and block it from being scheduled. Simply check the dates of service or select all. If you have the option to override the validations, which can be controlled through security rights, then you may choose to override, which indicates that you acknowledge the warning but still want to continue scheduling the event. If the event did not show up on this list, then it is deemed in compliance and it was scheduled cleanly. Again, hitting cancel would indicate that you heed the warning and do not want to proceed with scheduling these events. There is a Validate button at the bottom of the schedule that can be used to view all warning messages that have been displayed and overridden. This will inform anyone viewing the specific calendar, beyond just the scheduler, what is out of compliance for the scheduled events. To enable this, use the filters on the left-hand side to drill down to a specific caregiver or a specific client's events. When hitting Validate, enter in the date range that you'd like to validate and hit Run Validation. You will be presented with the list of validations that were overridden, and then you may make your own determination for how these should be handled, if in fact they should have been canceled rather than overridden. Once the event is scheduled, there are several features that can be found when opening the record by double-clicking on it. You can add or edit the note if you intend to document the service provided. You can add a task to send a message to someone regarding this event. And we have already reviewed how to open the client and review the client record. Additionally, you can review previous notes, previous vitals, and review the active medications. Once you have completed scheduling all of your events, use the filters on the left to review them. The Show All checkbox will show all scheduled events for the clients and caregivers in your specified cost centers. Lastly, you may print the desired calendars by clicking the Export button and entering in your date range. This may then be printed for further exported or for editing. For any questions, please submit your inquiries to our support department by going to Options, Support, and Contact Support.